Hello folks, and welcome back to One to Deploy. I'm your host, Daniel Martin, and today we're going to clear up one of the biggest sources of confusion in the crypto world: the difference between a utility token and a fundraising token. Now, this might seem like textbook stuff, but trust me, understanding this is critical. It's the difference between spotting a project with a real-world value versus one that's just raising money with smoke and mirrors. And let's be honest, in the crypto world, there has been a lot of smoke and mirrors in the industry recently. So, part one in today's utility versus fundraising tokens episode, why this matters. So here's the issue. Almost every project that is launching a token will try and tell you that it has a utility. That's the magic word basically when it comes to crypto tokens. It makes people feel safer. It says to investors, hey, you're buying something that actually does something. And it also tends to make the regulators back off a bit. It gives people the illusion that the token actually does something. But the reality? Well, in most cases, the token is just a fundraising instrument. And if you can't tell the difference, then, well, you're the one left holding the bag when the hype dies down. So, I'm going to break this down for you properly. Part two, what is a utility token? So a utility token is designed to do just one thing. It's designed to give you access to a product or a service or an ecosystem. Think about it like this. Maybe a train ticket. It doesn't give you equity in the train company or the railway company, but it lets you ride the train. Or perhaps credits on a gaming platform. You're not investing, but you're buying the right to play that game or unlock features within that game. Another example in a conversation I had with someone recently where they were questioning, okay, well, how would I use tokens in my business? They run childcare centres. And it became very obvious that the security of a child matters greatly, and securing that on an open ledger blockchain like a token of choice, so say Ethereum as an example, would make total sense. So the real world example there might be when a child checks in, that check-in moment and check out, and perhaps actions that happen with that child throughout the course of the day, could be associated with a token or could actually be stored on a token. So every time that child does something, a token event occurs. That becomes then integral to the security and operation of that business, and that token has real utility in that context. It wouldn't just be about fundraising. In the crypto world, some good examples of pure utility are a thing called Ethereum gas. So Ethereum gas is a part of the Ethereum network that is a fee essentially that's charged every time an Ethereum transaction goes through. Every transaction that you make on Ethereum requires ETH, so requires Ethereum. That is the gas fee, the transaction fee, if you will. Without it, the network literally doesn't move. So you are paying in Ethereum to use the Ethereum network. Even if you're building a token that sits on top of the Ethereum network, you pay in ETH or Ethereum to execute your transaction. Another example is a thing called Filecoin. If you want to store files on their decentralized network, then you pay in Filecoin tokens, but you're storing files on their decentralized network and you're paying in their token as well. So it's both money and function at the same time. Another one that is probably more well known is BNB, which is the Binance coin. Originally, what it did is it gave you discounted fees on trades, and it was pure straight up utility. You own BNB, you get discounted fees on your trades. It is straight up utility. The test here to work out whether you're talking about a utility token versus a fundraising token is, can I use this token right now to do something that I otherwise couldn't do? If the answer is yes, then you've got a utility token. If the answer is no, then we move into part three, which is, what is a fundraising token? All right, let's flip this on its head. A fundraising token, also commonly known as a security token, is not about access or usage. It's simply about raising money. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Here's how it works. The project issues a bunch of tokens, something akin to shares, like I spoke about in a previous episode. You buy them, not because you can use them today to do something, but because you believe they'll go up in value tomorrow. In some cases, these tokens are explicitly tied to things like revenue shares or profits or perhaps equity in the business, very much akin to owning stock in a company, again, like I spoke about in a previous episode. This is basically crypto's version of shares or crowdfunding. I mean, it really fundamentally is crowdfunding. You're giving money up front so the project can then fund development or marketing or growth, whatever it is it plans to do, with the expectation that you, as the person who purchased these fundraising tokens, will profit if they succeed. Some examples. So in the 2017 ICO boom, projects sold tons of tokens with no immediate utility. But of course, there was promise of a massive, big future ecosystem. This promise of utility didn't actually necessarily relate to utility. It was basically saying, you give us money now as fundraising, and then when this all works and goes magically well, you will get not only a capital upside, but you'll also get access to the utility in this ecosystem. A more current example, modern security token offerings, so what they're calling STOs. Again, we're getting very close to traditional shares here, where tokens represent fractionalized ownership in say real estate, revenue streams, or businesses. Now, where this becomes interesting is the token itself represents a fractionalized ownership in an asset that is real world. So again, we're starting to blend this securities and real world, Web3 versus real world type stuff. You can have fractionalized ownership in real estate simply by owning a security token. And that can be something a bit like owning a listed property share, listed property trusts, at least on the ASX, where there are organizations put together that own one or more properties, and by owning a share in that property trust, you're owning a share in the property. Security token offerings, so STOs, are the same thing, but they are done on the blockchain. There's no ASX, there's no stock exchange in the middle of all that. It is quite simply done on the blockchain. The key here with fundraising tokens is you are not buying utility. You are buying potential upside. So it is very much akin to traditional shares. You're not buying utility, you're buying potential upside. So, part 4. Why is there confusion? Why does everyone want to blur the lines on this? The answer is pretty clear, even though what people are trying to do is blur the lines. Because utility tokens are generally seen as safer, they're less regulated, and they are easier to market. If a project admits, we're just selling you a fundraising token, then all of a sudden you're in the crosshairs of things like the regulators, the SEC or ASIC. People are looking at you because you are quite simply fundraising. So the alternative is, what do? You wrap a fundraising token in a thin layer of utility. And they'll say things like, oh, you can use our token to vote on community decisions. Or you could use our token you can stake our token for rewards. Now, staking is, for those of you who aren't crypto people, staking is more or less sticking your funds in an interest account, and to stake it, you will then get some reward thereafter. So that reward is usually another amount of that token that will be added to your balance. But look, let's be honest here. If the only utility that you're getting, and I say utility in quotes here, is speculative staking, then the reality is it's not a utility token. It is quite simply just financial engineering. So why the confusion? The confusion is, if you have a utility token, it's much easier to execute on as a business. It's less regulated, it's going to be easier to market, and it's seen as safer. So you can dodge a whole lot of things. Now, that doesn't mean to say that utility tokens are bad. It just means that if you are pitching a fundraising token and calling it a utility token, you can get away with more stuff. So as an investor, you want to look pretty closely at that to see whether you are getting a utility or whether you're just getting a fundraising token. Part 5, the practical lens. So how do you spot the difference when these are out in the wild. So for investors, ask yourself, it's a pretty easy question. Ask yourself, can I actually do anything meaningful with this token today? Not in 3 years or not in some roadmap fantasy, but today. If the answer is no, then you are straight up buying a fundraising token. If the answer to the question, can I do anything meaningful with this token today, is no, then you are buying a fundraising token. For founders, those of you who are looking to start your own cryptocurrency or token in some form, ask yourself, what role does my token play in the actual product? If your business or platform, whatever it is, can run perfectly fine without the token, then it's probably just a fundraising tool and not a utility. Now, there is, of course, a little bit of grayness in that one, and that is, as a founder, you can choose to have a functionality of your offering delivered through blockchain or not through blockchain. And let's use the train ticket example from before or the childcare center example from before. The reality is both of those circumstances could run perfectly well without a cryptocurrency token. But if you've chosen to provide the security of your business offering, so in the childcare center's sake, we're talking about the security of children here. If you've chosen to provide the value of your business through that token, then actually it's more than just running perfectly fine without a token. Your unique selling proposition dies if you don't have that token. So it can get a bit gray, and you could argue the point, well, if you just took that out, then we can still do childcare. Yeah, but does it offer the value proposition that this business is supposed to offer? And the answer in that particular context would potentially be no. So it can get grey. Make it clear to your investors and your customers why you've chosen to do this. And that basically then answers the question. The question being, do I need this thing? And the answer is yes, I do, because our business is so secure, or it is so decentralized, or it is so whatever. That is why we chose to have a token at the heart of what we do. This is where projects live or die. If your token has no inherent demand from users, so there's no need for the user to take that token, then the only thing that's driving it is hype and speculation. And as we've seen, that simply doesn't last. Part 6, why both matter. So here's the nuance. Both of these token types play a valid role. Fundraising tokens aren't bad as such. They can be a great way for projects to raise capital, and particularly if they're well structured and structured transparently. By contrast, utility tokens aren't automatically good. Plenty of tokens claim utility but never gain real adoption. Now that comes down to, is your business offering or your platform offering good enough? Not really is the token appropriate, but is the underlying business good enough to gain the adoption that you're asking for? The smartest projects? Well, they often separate the two. They'll have a clean fundraising structure, maybe even through equity or regulated STOs. And they will have a genuine utility that's essential for using their platform. So these projects are being very clear about both of their approaches, and you can then buy into either one of those two, knowing quite clearly what you're getting. Part 7, the big picture. So at the end of the day, tokens are tools. They are tools that achieve an outcome. The question is, what job does this particular tool that I'm looking to purchase actually do? If the job is funding the company, then it is a fundraising token. If the job is making the product work, then it's a utility token. And if a project can't answer the question clearly, that's your red flag to say, this is not for me. So in closing, utility tokens, they're like fuel, tickets, or credits. They unlock usage. Fundraising tokens, they're like shares. They fund development and they offer upside. Understanding this difference doesn't just make you a smarter investor, it makes you harder to fool. And that's where this industry desperately needs, or rather what this industry desperately needs. It is fewer people to be fooled and more people asking the right questions. Today, folks, that's today's one to deploy. The single thing that you can take away and deploy straight away is next time you see a new token launch, don't ask, quote, what's the hype? Ask, is this a utility or a fundraising token? That lens will save you a lot of money and probably a lot of headaches. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Daniel Martin, and as usual, till next time, think sharp, build bold, one to deploy.